Hi everyone, welcome to Vantage Live analysis session for today. Right, so today's coverage is mainly on dollar yen. If there are any other chat requests as well, right, please feel free to put them under the questions tab. Okay, so I'll just give it about 1 to 2 more minutes for more people to join us before we kickstart the session. Right, for those of you guys who are here with us via Zoom, if you have any questions, right, just feel free to type your questions under the questions chat. If not, if you're with us via the stream, right, just type your questions there. It can be FX pairs, or if you want to take a look at specific equities related, just type your ticker there and we'll take a look at them together. Okay, so we'll kickstart the session shortly. Okay, I've request for Aussie yen, right? So, okay, Aussie and Euro yen. So I'll be taking a look at that shortly. And so, yep, got your request, Abraham. So we'll be taking a look at that in a while. Okay, so for those of you guys who have any other chat requests as well, right, just type them under the questions chat and let's go through them. You're most welcome. All right, so let's kickstart our session. So just a quick introduction of myself, right? I'm Lee Sing. You can also find me on LinkedIn. So for those of you guys who are watching a recording of this, right, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have any questions. And of course, if you're with us live, right, if you have any chat requests, just put them either via the stream or via the app. So just a quick disclaimer, right? The information presented here, it's not to be treated as investment advice. It's for educational purposes only. So for live analysis sessions, right, it's our agenda for today, right? So as always, we will go through the economic calendar first, just to see if there are any high impact news events. And following that, we will be taking a look at our trade setups. So today's focus would be mainly on dollar yen. We have requests for Euro yen as well as Aussie yen. And so if you have any other requests, just put them under the chat box. And of course, right, throughout the session, we're open to Q&A. So if you have any questions, just feel free to put your questions there. Okay, so before that, right, let's take a look at our trade setups, right? So before dollar yen, as always, I like to take a look at dollar index. But even prior to that, right, let's take a look at our economic calendar first. So I'll just bring that up in a moment. And good afternoon to you as well, Jamilu. Right, great to have you here with us. Okay, so let me just share my screen for this. Okay, so this is the economic calendar for this week, right? So you can see that the upcoming high impact news events for today, right, mainly would involve pound, right, for the PMI data, as well as US PMI data. So those are the main ones that we have. Right, so earlier news release, right, includes BOJ. So we can see that BOJ held rates constant. Still in a negative interest rate environment, right, as compared to its peers. So that's one. And I believe ECB as well. Right, so, Bank of England. So Bank of England, right, so they kept rates constant, right, and this is for, and affects the pound, right, so that's on BOE, right, and also FOMC statement, right, it adopts a more hawkish tone, right, you don't see it here, but if you take a look at it, right, just do a quick search on FOMC, it seems that there might be, they're leaning more towards the hawkish side, so there are potentially intentions for more rate hikes coming up. And so those are the main ones for today. Now, with that, let's take a look at our charts. So let me just bring up the charts. So as always, right, let's take a look at dollar index first. So if you take a look at where we are on dollar index, you can see that dollar index on the monthly, we have this region. So prices are coming into a support area here. So you can see this zone. Let me just remove this, right? So this area here, which price tested previously as a resistance, it broke to the upside. And currently we're seeing a retest of this zone. If you take a look at the most recent move, right, so prices were in a bearish structure, but the most recent pullback, this whole leg itself, it has been bullish. If you take a look at it on the weekly, on the daily, you can see this whole zone, right, prices have been forming higher lows and higher highs. Where we were yesterday, you can see that price came in, right, we have this previous resistance area, which failed. And when price did this whole pullback leg, right, it has been in a bullish structure. And what happened here is that we can see price broke and closed to the upside. So I emphasize the need for closing price, right? So ideally, as much as possible, we need to see price close to the upside to consider that a break in structure. It's a price broke and close to the upside. In this case, you can see that it currently did a pullback, right? And this is the last demand zone that we're really at. So this on a weekly time frame. We see this on the daily as well, right? So on the daily time frame, we have this zone here. You can see that price broke and close to the upside, did a pullback into the demand area, right? And right now we're just seeing a further push up. So that's one, right? Now, another resistance area that we have highlighted is this region here. So this was really from the monthly, right? So if I move back to the monthly time frame, you can see here, this whole zone, right? So prices in a bearish structure, it did a pullback. Price came in, right? Tapped the demand zone, failed to break below the close, right? And we're just seeing a further move to the upside. So this creates a potential resistance target that we have on the higher time frame. So that's on the monthly. And so this is really where we are right now, right? If you go through the lower time frames, right, we're seeing quite a bit of whipsaw here. But if you take a look at the general structure, be it on the 4 hours or daily, you can see this is the zone, right? In fact, when price did a pullback, you can see that when it did a pullback into the demand area. So let me just remove all of this, right? So let's focus on this zone. So this region, you can see this area, when price did a pullback into this zone, right? This whole area into the demand zone here. If you move to the lower time frames, right, you can see that change in structure clearly, right? So lower lows and lower highs. And then what happened after is that you can see price then break and close to the upside here. So that's on dollar index. Right, so right now where we are on dollar index, you can see that prices are currently still testing this zone as a support region, right? This part can get a bit choppy with the whipsaw, right? Driven by the news. But in general, if you take a look at it, right, if we defer back to the higher time frame, on the daily time frame, you can see that this is where we are right now. So in terms of the demand region, right, prices are still testing the zone. You can see the last area here, price broke and close to the upside. So this is where we are right now on the daily time frame. So still in a demand area, I think we could still see upside, right, to this region, testing the high here. Right, so limited upside, but this is where we are right now. If you go through with the lower time frame on the 4 hours, you can see that prices are currently testing this high. So the setup to be in terms of where we are right now, right, the most immediate support level that we have really comes from this region. So you can see this zone again, just looking at how price interacted with it as both a support and resistance. So if I put these levels in close, you can see that price came in, tested this as both a support resistance area. So we do see a retest of this zone, right? There's a potential for movement to the upside. So as always, if price does pull back into this region, you'll be seeing bearish structure, lower lows and lower highs. Any sign of respect of this region, right? We're seeing that change in market structure for continuation to the upside. Okay, so that's on dollar index. Right now with that, let's take a look at other setups that we have. So let's just review on dollar yen first, right? And we'll be taking a look at the other chart requests. So I have requests for pound dollar and dollar franc. So yeah, we'll be taking a look at that shortly as well. Right, hello to you as well, Eridon. Okay, so if you guys have any other chart requests, just feel free to type them under the chat. Okay, now let's take a look at dollar yen, right? So if you take a look at dollar yen on the higher time frame, you can see that we have a high highlighted here, right? This region. this area. So there's a high here, right? So price came in, right? And we're seeing potential for more upside. And within this zone, this whole pullback leg, you're again seeing bullish structure. So higher lows and higher highs. If you move down to the weekly time frame, you see this as well, right? Just noting the clear highs and lows. If I put these levels in close, right, on the weekly, the daily, you're seeing again clear higher peaks and troughs. Okay, so let me just erase the drawings. So that's where we are right now. If you move to the daily, right, pretty much the same setup. What we do have on the daily is that you can see price broke and closed to the upside. And this creates the last region or the last high here, which serves as a support, right? So this area over here. So you can see that prices are currently testing this zone on the daily time frame. So nothing much that is too different from what we're seeing on the weekly. If we move down to the 4 hours time frame, we can see that this is the last range that we are trading within, this area here. So overall, the general direction is still bullish. If you take a look at it on the daily or even the weekly, you can see very clear structure and potentially an ascending channel being formed here too. Okay, I would not say that this is the most valid channel. Ideally, we want to see price test the resistance of the channel twice, but in this case, right, it doesn't really show here, right? So if I were to just highlight this, probably a smaller channel would be really this region, right? So this area, you can see that price came in, we tapped the support and resistance, so this is probably a more valid channel, and we're right now trading in the middle of it. And so this is on the daily time frame. Let me just put this channel here. Right, so this is where we are. You can see bullish structure. If we're on the 4 hours, you can see this is the last region that we have in terms of the horizontal zones, right? Overall, the higher time frame direction is still bullish. So this is the high that we could see price target, right? So as we have covered in earlier sessions, when we talk about bullish market structures, right, price forming clear higher lows and higher highs, you can see that when it does a pullback into potential demand, it creates this high as a potential target. Now, if we were to apply the same concept here, you can see that again, where we have higher lows and higher highs, price breaking and closing to the upside, did a pullback, and you can see the break-in structure comes in over here, price broke to the upside, pulled back, right, and creates this value, this high as a valid target. Okay, so that's where we are right now. So I do want to mark out this monthly, the 4 hours high here. Now with that, let's go to the lower time frame. So on the lower time frame, you can again see the structure, right? So prices are still in the bullish market structure, right? You're forming clear higher lows and higher highs. The most immediate support level that we have on the 1 hour time frame comes from this zone here. You can see this region. So this area where price consolidated, we see a break and close to the upside. Right, so this is still a support region, right? So if price has yet to reach this region and it does a pullback from here, right? This is a potential support we can look at. Okay, so this zone, right? Again, you can see if we do see any pullback into this area, it has to be in a bearish structure, right? For price to move lower, coming into this zone. And when that happens, right, there will be again that change in market structure before it continues targeting the high that caused the pullback. So that's one, right? Apart from that, what we can also do with this, right? You can see this whole move that we have to the upside, this whole move with a potential pullback. This is the lowest point. This is the highest point. So what we can do is also use a retracement level to see if then there's any retracement that lines up with the zone. So for Fibonacci retracement, you can see the 38.2%. Right? So these are all the default levels. So for those of you guys who wants to find out more about Fibonacci retracement, right, we do have a series on that, so you can refer to it. I believe it's on the YouTube page, right? So just go over to vantagemarkets.com, right, and you will be able to see the recording. Okay, so in this example, essentially you can see at every level you will have a retracement number, right? So what we're trying to do is that we're trying to find if there are any levels that coincide with the zone, right? But we're not trying to force it. If there isn't any, then so be it, right? So in this example, you can see that the 38.2% lines up with the zone, right? So there's a potential area. And this region, if I were to extend it across to the left, you can see that it was also a previous resistance zone. So it was a previous resistance, and then it tested as a support before it continues much higher. So this is the support region that we have on dollar yen, right? And with this high as a target, right? Beyond that, if price breaks and closes beyond this region, right, you can see again, we need bullish structure to form wait for a potential pullback for entry, targeting this area here. So this is on the monthly region, right? Essentially the high that we have, right? So again, one other thing to note is that if we are coming into a higher time frames resistance, right? So for example, if we're coming into this zone, if price starts pushing into this area, right, you can see that if we do see any reversal, this reversal must be first highlighted, or it will first be shown on the lower time frame. So if price starts coming into this zone, right, you see any kind of reversal, you can see that there will be a change in market structure, because the assumption is that if prices are in a bullish trend, right, and if it continues this way, successive higher lows and higher highs, right, this, when price does a pullback, it comes into a demand area. We're just going to see it continue targeting this high. So that's the idea, right? So if we're to just look back slightly on this zone, right? So for example, you can see, excuse me, you can see this region, right? Even this whole move on the weekly, you can see that when price did a pullback, right? This whole region here, let me just do a highlight of this so that it shows a different color. So let's take a look at the one in blue, right? So this whole region that caused the pullback, you can see that if I'm on the monthly, right, on the monthly time frame, this region caused that pullback. But if you move to the lower time frame, let's say on the weekly, right, this whole leg that caused the pullback, it's actually in a bearish structure. You can see this clearly, right? The one that's highlighted in blue. So essentially lower lows and lower highs to the downside. So you can see this structure. And then what happens, right? When price starts changing direction, or we're seeing a change in trend, right, back into the primary trend where prices are more bullish, you can see that price would start breaking and closing above the last high. And this is confirmation, right, that prices could be changing direction, because the converse is true, right? So if price starts coming into the zone, it breaks to the downside, then we could see this trend continue. Right, so I hope that it's clear, right, in terms of how we can actually combine, basically looking at market structure across different time frames. The idea is that we're trying to identify higher time frames, resistance or supply zones, right? And if price comes into this region, right, if there's any indication of price acknowledging the supply region, because at this moment, right, you can see prices, if it continues in this bullish structure, it could break this zone altogether. Okay, so now with that, right, let's take a look at other setups, right? So we have requests for Aussie yen, so let's take a look at that. So on the higher time frame, first, you can see on the monthly time frame on Aussie yen, we have a high that price came into previously, this region, right? And this region has been tested multiple times. So this is where we are right now in terms of Aussie yen, right? Near the high. Okay, apart from that, right, what we also have on Aussie yen, right, on the monthly, you can see that there was a previous resistance level here. It failed, price broke to the upside. If I put this level in close, you can see this clearly here. And so this was a previous resistance, price failed, broke to the upside. And if I were to highlight this zone, you can see that essentially this area, right, this region that we have, was the previous resistance. Notice what happens after, right? So when price broke to the upside, it came in, tested this zone again as a support here. So you can see that it tested this zone again as a support. And when it pushes back into this area, right, so this whole region, you can again see bearish structure. So lower lows, lower highs to the downside, pushing into this zone. And then what happens after, when price taps into this region, the support area, you're seeing that consolidation of this move, right? Price starts changing direction. Instead of continuing with this lower lows and lower highs, we're seeing a break in structure. Price starts breaking and closing to the upside here, right? And we're seeing that continuation. So this is where we are right now on Aussie yen, right? The most recent support region that we have on Aussie yen, the daily, you can see that this is also the last high that price broke and closed to the upside. So it's the support area here. If I put these levels in close, you can see this as well. Right? So this is where we are. If you were to extend this region, this is basically the last resistance turn support level. Okay, so that's on the daily time frame, right? It's not too different from where we were on the weekly. It's just that if you move down to the daily time frame, you will be able to see more details, right, in terms of the market structure, right? So again, we've highlighted the peaks and troughs. So that's one, right? Then of course we have the target. So you can see that this daily high, you can see this daily high here that caused a pullback. So which means that if price comes into the zone and we're seeing bullish structure forming here, right, we can create this as a potential target. Of course, beyond that, price could go further, but when price comes into this zone, right, I'll highlight this. Instead of using the close, right, I'll just take the high, which is basically this area. Because this is a high, and again, right, looking at the bullish market structure, if price does pull back into this zone, right, we usually see this high that causes the pullback as a potential target. So this is where we are right now. If you apply this, you can see price came in. We did a pullback into a support region. It created this high as a potential target. Okay, so now let's move on to the 4 hours time frame. So on the 4 hours, you can see this region, right? Not much that we can see here. You can see price came into the zone. You don't really see much of the market structure here, right? You're just seeing bearish structure, lower lows and lower highs, and then consolidation before price does a break to the upside, right? So let's narrow down our time frame, right, on this. So when price starts coming into the demand area that we have over here, if you move down to the 1 hour time frame, you can see this clearly. And so on the 1 hour time frame, what we have, you can see this area, right? So again, bearish structure. So if I put this levels again in close, you can see this, right? Lower, this whole move to the downside, you are seeing bearish structure, lower lows and lower highs. Right now, what happens? You can see price starts breaking structure here, and broke and closed to the upside, did a pullback, right, into a demand area, this region, right? So price broke and closed to the upside, did a pullback into a demand area, right? And then what we have after is that you can see that price then moved up much higher. Now, within this area itself, on the 1 hour time frame, you can see that it created two things, right? So if price does a pullback from here, going into New York session, right? When price does a pullback from here, you can see it might create a high, that's one. And a pullback into a support region, right, creates this area on the 1 hour as a demand. So the extreme of this leg, right? So it creates this as a 1 hour demand zone. And so essentially, if price does a pullback into this area, right, we can look for opportunities to long, right, if there is a change in market structure on the lower time frame direction. Pretty much what we were seeing here, right? It's just that it's applied across different time frames. This was on the daily, and you're looking at this change in market structure on the 1 hour. Once there's that consolidation, right, 1 hour starts forming demand areas or demand zones, right? So this is the last demand region that we have here. You can see this area that caused the break in structure. It broke to the upside, close to the upside as well. So this is one. So if price starts coming into this region, we're not taking any immediate entries, but rather we're waiting again for the change in structure, targeting this high that caused the pullback. At this point, right, if price comes into this zone, there are two scenarios, right? One is that it could just wick lower, right, breaking this zone altogether, right? Or it could, of course, right, respect this region before we see that pullback. So a lot of it is also dependent on the lower time frame, right? It's very similar to what we're seeing with this example here, right? Based on the daily zone and also the 1 hour market structure. Okay, so that's on Aussie yen. Now let's take a look at another setup, which is on Euro yen. Okay, so let's take a look at Euro yen, right? So again, on the higher time frame. So if you take a look at the higher time frame on the monthly region first, on Euro yen, we can see there isn't much, right? So let me just remove this, right? So where we are right now, you can see that price came in, was just saying price hovering here. Right, so prices were pretty much testing this resistance area. You can see this region, right? Tested a few times, right? So that's where we are right now on the monthly time frame. Yeah, that's pretty much right. There isn't anything else we can potentially highlight here, I think. Right now, this zone, right? So if I were to move back slightly on the monthly, it's a pretty far region, but here, right? So focus on this area here. On the monthly, we can see that price consolidated, and then we see a break to the downside. Now, within this zone, right, this stands out for me, which is this doji. You can see this area, right? We have a doji. And following that doji structure, we see a strong break and close to the downside. So how I interpret this is that we have a range that price traded within for the month. And following that, right, we see a strong break to the downside. So this area becomes a potential supply region, right? So don't take my word for it, right? Let's just focus on this doji. We move to the lower time frame. So when you move down to the lower time frame, you can see that this doji that we have circled, right? Essentially, this is that area. You can see this support resistance level that price traded within for that month before it decided to break to the downside, this region. Right, so this is where we are right now. So this doji itself serves as a potential support for me. I mean, a resistance or a supply region here. Right, so let me just highlight this doji as a potential zone. But I think prices are still quite far from this region, right? So let's take a look at that. Right, I'll just highlight this. So this is the doji on the monthly time frame. Right, you can see that's on the monthly. If you take a look at the most recent price movement here, right, just this whole region, you can see that prices are in the bullish structure. If you move down to the weekly time frame, on the weekly time frame, we can probably see this clearer as well. So clear higher lows and higher highs. Right now, we're seeing a pullback, right? And prices are testing this zone, this demand area. Right? So essentially, if you see it on the weekly, you can see price broke and closed to the upside. And we're seeing a retest of this region. So on the daily, so one thing I do want to highlight, right? Within this zone, what we are seeing here is basically price. Imagine price breaking, forming a new high, and then broke and closed to the upside. And right now we're seeing a retest. So we're in the middle of this pullback leg that we have. And within this whole structure, you can see this pullback leg that we have here, right? On the daily, essentially, again, it's bearish structure. So lower lows and lower highs, right? You can see here. Within just this whole move itself, we're in a bearish structure, right? Euro yen, this whole move here, right? So you can see this zone. We have this region. So price came in, right? Form a new low. This whole pullback leg, you can see that price came in and broke to the downside, and price did a pullback into a potential resistance area, and right now we're seeing this region, right? So within this move itself, there are two things, right? So one is that when price broke to the downside and did a pullback, right, it created this region. You can see this zone. So when price broke to the downside, you can see the structure, it broke and closed to the downside, did a pullback, right? This low itself became a potential region on the daily, right? So this is where we are right now on the daily time frame. If I were to move down to the 4 hours time frame, on the 4 hours, right, you can see this area. So prices, it's pretty choppy, to be honest, right? This whole area here, we're seeing a test of this zone twice, and price coming back into this region, a low that caused a pullback. Now on the 4 hours time frame, this whole area, we can see a potential supply region over here. You can see that price tested this zone. So this whole pullback leg itself, right, we're seeing higher lows and higher highs. And then what happened? Price broke to the upside and broke and closed to the downside, right? So if I put this levels and close, you can see this clear higher lows and higher highs, and then price broke and closed to the downside, right? So that break in structure here. So on the 4 hours itself, right, it created this as a potential resistance region. So that's on the 4 hours, right? So this is where we are right now. You can see price came in, tested this zone. So when it pushes into this region, right, if the lower time frame starts turning bearish, we have this as a potential target, this low here on the 4 hours, and of course this low, which is on the daily time frame. So let's take a look at where we are on the 1 hour. So on the 1 hour, right, you can see that there isn't much, right? So I'll just move down to the lower time frame to see if this is clearer. Okay, so where we are right now on the 15 minutes, you can see again, right, pushing into this leg, we have price forming higher lows and higher highs. You can see this whole structure, right? So price came in, it came in here, broke to the upside, broke and closed to the upside. And then what happened after is that you can see price then broke and closed to the upside again. So within this region itself, right, I think that we could see a further push up in price, right? Given that the whole market structure is still bullish. If you're on the 15 minutes, 1 hour, you can see this whole pullback leg that we have pushing into this higher time frame, this 4 hour supply, right? This is still bullish. So they're still staying higher lows and higher highs. So again, right, if there's any change in structure, right, it has to first be done on the lower time frame, right? So right now where we are, you can see this whole structure, price forming this bullish market structure, right? So this whole zone is still bullish, price broke and closed to the upside. So if you take a look at it, right, probably clearer on the 1 hour, right? So this whole region is just a wick on the higher time frame, right? So within this move, I think that price could push into this zone, right? Potentially to tap this high again. And if the lower time frame starts turning bearish, right, then we could see a potential reversal targeting this low. But right now, none of it is still showing, right? At least on the 1 hour time frame. Okay, so this is for me on Euro Yen, right? Where we are right now, it's very choppy, to be honest, right? This whole move on the, if you take a look at it on the higher time frame, right, coming to potential demand, but so on the weekly, you can see it's coming to a potential demand, but at the same time, right, it's pushing back into this zone, and within this whole leg itself is still bearish, right? Still forming lower lows and lower highs. You see that on the daily, you see that on the 4 hours, right? And right now prices are testing a potential supply on the 4 hours, creating this too as a potential target. But when price starts coming into this zone, right, on the 4 hours, right, if you move down to the lower time frame, right, this whole pullback leg, it's still bullish. So until that changes on the lower time frames, right, then there are two things, right? We could see price mitigate deeper into this zone, potentially breaking this region altogether. So that's possible as well, right? So that's where we are right now on the 1 hour. So if there's a clearer market structure being formed here on the 1 hour, right, to show that prices are indeed acknowledging this 4 hour supply, then I think we could see a deeper pullback, right? Right now, right, it's not there yet, at least on the 1 hour time frame. Okay, so I hope that answers your question. Right now, let's take a look at another setup on pound dollar, dollar franc, and yes, we'll be taking a look at gold as well, Harris. So, right, so those are the setups. Let's take a look at that, right? So on pound dollar first, you can see on the monthly, right? So we have price coming into demand rate area. Price broke to the upside. We're seeing a potential retest of this zone. If you're on the weekly time frame, the daily, you can see pound dollar is still bearish, right? Just bearish structure here, lower lows, lower highs. You move to the 4 hours time frame, pretty much the same things, right? So now on the 4 hours, this gets interesting. You can see on the 4 hours time frame, we're seeing price coming in to test this region. So let me just remove all of this. So you can see right now on the 4 hours time frame, this is where we are. So depending on how this candle closed, you can see price came in, right? Came in wick to the downside, right? So this region that we have over here, right? So it created two things. It created a range. So we have the high that caused the pullback. So this range that we have here as a resistance area, price did a pullback into the support zone. So this is one. If you move down to the 1 hour time frame, so again, the 1 hour has yet to close, right? So depending on how this levels close on the 1 hour, not much, right? We're getting a test of this zone on the 4 hours and 1 hour, but beyond that, right, there isn't anything else. Likewise, on the 15 minutes, so there isn't much. We can see that price came in, tapped the 4 hour zone, the support region, but this whole leg to the downside is still bearish, right? You're still seeing price forming lower lows and lower highs. It's still about 10 more minutes before this candle close, right? So depending on how this candle close, you can see that if price closed beyond the low of the previous candle over here, right, then we're pretty much still bearish on the 15 minutes time frame. So until the 15 minutes starts forming bullish structure, right, then we can play a shorter term trade, right, targeting this high, which is on the 4 hours, this high here. Right, so this depends on the setup, but if you're on the 15 minutes or even the 1 hour, you can see that this whole structure is still bearish. Right, so that's where we are right now. Okay, so I hope that answers your question on pound dollar, right? A big part of it depends on this candle's close, right? So if we do see a movement to the upside, usually what happens is that we'll see that consolidation, price breaking to the upside, pulling back into a demand area. It creates a valid target for long, right? So once this target is created, then you can take a long targeting this move, right? And potentially the higher 4 hours resistance area here. This is the 4 hours resistance that caused the pullback, right? But if price breaks and close below this low, right, then we're still in the bearish structure, then that's when we want to wait for another setup, right? So any pullback itself, at least on the lower time frames, right, is still not showing yet. So we have to look at it on the 15 minutes, right? So that's pound dollar for me. And now let's take a look at dollar franc. Okay, so let's take a look at dollar franc. So on dollar franc, again, on the higher time frame. So on the higher time frame, this is the zone, right? We're seeing a break and test of this region. This on the monthly. Yeah, so a break and test of this region here. You can see this zone, right? So price broke and closed to the downside. Maybe it's clearer here. You have a support area. Price broke and closed to the downside. This area here. We're seeing a potential retest of it as resistance. So it's really this whole zone actually, right? This whole area that price broke and closed to the downside. So that's on the monthly region. But you can see that even if there's a potential pushing into the supply region, what we want to do is narrow our focus to this whole leg. So the idea behind this is that if we do see, right, if prices are indeed pushing into a resistance area and reversing from here, right, this whole leg that causes that push or the pullback into the zone, right, this whole leg has to start turning bearish first. So if we take a look at it on the weekly or even the daily time frame, you can see that that's not happening at the moment, right? It's still bullish. Prices are still in a bullish structure, right? So clear highs, clear lows being formed here. If you take a look at it on the weekly, you take a look at it on the daily, right? So this is where we are right now. So there are no signs of reversal on the monthly time frame yet. So which is why if we do see any reversal, you can see that the target will start forming and it will start showing bearish lower lows and lower highs, right? If not, prices could just continue breaking this zone altogether. So that's where we are right now on the daily, right? So there's not much setup at the moment. If we go through the weekly, the daily, right? So that's really where we are. Now, if you move down to the 4 hours time frame, likewise, we have this bullish candle, right? Probably driven by news, right? Following the Fed's hawkish stance. So in this case, you can see this zone on the 1 hour, right? It becomes slightly clearer. So what we have here is that you can see price broke to the upside. It did a potential pullback into the zone, right? It created a high over here, this high. as a potential target. So in the bullish market structure again, right, we can see that any pullback into a high, it creates this as a potential target. And that's pretty much, right? So that's on the 1 hour time frame. So beyond that, on the 1 hour, right, you can see that within this whole area, this whole move that we have, right, prices are just in a bullish structure. It's forming higher lows and higher highs to the downside. The last support area that we have on the lower time frame on the 1 hour really comes in over here. Right, so this region, you can see if I put these levels in close as well, you have this resistance area, right? So price forming against structure, higher lows and higher highs. If I were to mark out just the highs and lows, you can see this is the last high, price broke structure to the upside. So that's the demand area, right? Again, if price does pull back into this zone, we're not taking an immediate entry, right? If it does a pullback into this zone, it creates two things. Every pullback, it creates a high that can be used as a potential target. And if the lower time frame starts turning bullish, then this high can be a potential take profit target. So that's where we are. And if you see it on, again, very choppy, right? 15 minutes time frame, probably not as clear, right? If you move down to the lower time frame, you can see this, right? So on the lower time frame, you can see again lower lows and lower highs to the downside, right? So this region itself, right? This is where we are right now. If you're on the 5 minutes, you can see that this whole pullback leg is still bearish, right? So we need to wait for clear consolidation to the downside, price testing the zone, right? Before it could potentially continue higher, right? So I think probably the setup will be clearer, right? When New York comes in. Right? So this is where we are, right? So this is a potential target, short-term setup. If price does respect this region, right? This potential short-term target to move to the upside here. Okay, so that's on dollar franc, but this setup for me is not the clearest, right? Just because of this whole move. And also if you're on the 4 hours time frame, right, we're just seeing that strong push to the upside, that pullback, and beyond that, right, that's not much here. Right, so that's on dollar franc. Right now, let's take a look at gold. So if you take a look at gold, let me just move this, right? So on gold, on the higher time frame first, we have two things, right? On the monthly, so again, the monthly, we just have this high that price came in, tested 3 times. We're seeing a breakout and pullback of the trend line. And following that, we have a consolidation at this region, right? So you're seeing price forming, coming in to test the low, but failing to break the low. So because of that, it creates this as a potential target on the monthly, this high here. So if you move to the weekly time frame, you can see that prices are in a bullish structure, starting to form higher lows and higher highs. We're seeing a break and a pullback into a demand region. It creates a weekly high, this high that caused a pullback, as a potential target here too. So that's on the weekly. If we move to the daily time frame, right, down on the daily, you can see this again pushing into this zone. You have bearish structure, lower lows, lower highs. And yesterday, price came in, right, it broke structure to the upside. So it broke and closed to the upside here, this area. Right, and right now we're seeing a retest of this zone again, right? So this is where we were. So previously we were looking at 2 regions, right? So one is this support area, which we've highlighted, this support area here. The other is this resistance area, which price broke. You can see that it pulled back, right? It broke into this zone, and then it retested this region, this support area here, right? So that's where we are on the daily time frame. Now, if you move down to the 4 hours time frame, so on the 4 hours time frame, right, we highlighted 2 areas, right? One is the support region. You can see beyond that, right, price actually came in and broke and closed to the downside. This is what we have on the 4 hours, right? And also the second area that we have, it's this area here. So this area that was highlighted, essentially it was the previous support level tested, price retested this region as a resistance. So if we do see a potential pullback into this zone, right, this is another region to consider. So within this leg itself, we can see that if price does a pullback, right? So 2 things. One is that if it does a pullback into this zone on this supply region that we have over here, right, on the 4 hours time frame, again, you can see this whole pullback leg that we have, right? It creates a low here for a short-term pullback, right? But for any kind of pullback, we need the lower time frame to start turning bearish here first. So if I move down, right, to the 1 hour time frame, you can see on the 1 hour, this is still bullish. So if you take a look at the 1 hour, you can see very clear higher lows and higher highs being formed, right? So just looking at this zone, if you take a look at the 15 minutes, right, this is clear as well. So clear bullish structure being formed here, right? So which means that if we do see any pullback, again, that has to first be indicated in a form of lower lows and lower highs. So without that, right, you can see that prices in the bullish structure is just going to target the high. So any shots taken from a resistance area, right, likely could be stopped out. Okay, so that's where we are right now for gold. Right, so if price comes into this zone, right, if it pushes into this region on the lower time frame, right, then this is a potential target I think that we can look at. Right, so that's where we are right now. If you take a look at it on the lower time frame, we still have a support area over here. The price broke and closed to the upside, so this region. So if price does a pullback into this zone, again, we can look for a lower time frame target, right, targeting this high if the lower time frame starts turning bullish. Okay, so you can see that if it pushes into this zone, again, you'll be seeing that lower lows and lower highs being formed, targeting this high. So if you don't want to go into the lower time frames, just looking at the higher time frame, if you're on the 1 hour time frame, you can see that right now this whole zone, in fact, is still bullish, right? So if I have to highlight this, covering the lows of this doji, right, this whole region. So if price does a pullback into this zone, right, it creates a structure or this high here that we can play on the lower time frame as a target, right? So that's for me on gold. Right, so yeah, I believe that's what we have. Okay, let's take a look at dollar CAD and pound Aussie. Okay, thank you for your kind words, Abraham, right? You're very welcome, right? I'm glad that helps on Euro Yen. Okay, let's take a look at pound Aussie, right? So I believe we went through pound Aussie yesterday. So this is where we were on pound Aussie, right? So if you take a look at it on the higher time frame, yesterday on pound Aussie, I believe one of you guys asked this, right? So we have a resistance region, right? You can see price came in, tested the zone, and you can see this whole area that caused the pullback, right? So this region that caused the pullback, this is the target for shorts. So that's what we highlighted here, right? This whole line. And if you move down to the lower time frame, you can see again that change in structure. So price forming higher lows and higher highs. But what we saw yesterday, right, is that when we saw that pullback, you can see that this area, right, there's a change in structure. So probably not as clear on the 1 hour time frame. But if you go down to the lower time frame, you can see on the 15 minutes, right, you're seeing clear higher lows and higher highs. And what happened following that? Price broke to the downside. It broke and closed to the downside, retested. So we highlighted this region as a supply zone, right? So this area here. Essentially, it was the area that consolidated before price broke to the downside. And so following the break in structure it created, you can see this tested this zone again as a resistance area, right? So this is one. So with that, we went down to the lower time frame, right? If you go down to the 5 minutes, I believe, right? So this region was also highlighted on the 5 minutes. You can see here, right? So essentially price came in, pushed into the supply region. Again, the same thing, right? If we do see higher lows and higher highs, price could break this zone altogether. But what happens after is that you can see price came in, tapped into the zone. It broke structure, did a pullback, right? Into the supply region, right? And then from here, it just moved much lower. This was the pullback leg, right? It was the one that caused the pullback. So it created this as a low. So you can see price came in here, which is why I emphasize that when we're in a bearish structure, right, this low that caused the pullback can be a potential target. But beyond that, right, of course, in this example, it went way beyond. It even went to the 4 hours low, which was this region here, right, and much lower. But when price starts coming into this zone, right, this is when you want to start protecting the positions, right, on the lower time frames, either trailing the stop losses, right, or in this region, you can see when it tapped into the low that caused the pullback, we're seeing quite an extensive pullback before it breaks to the downside. Right, so that's for pound Aussie previously. Now let's take a look at where we are now, right? So if you're on the daily, right, the levels don't change. On the weekly time frame, you're still seeing a resistance region that failed previously. And it's now tested again as a support, right? And this is really where we are right now. You can see this whole pullback leg that we have on the daily, it's just bearish structure, lower lows and lower highs. You see it on the daily as well. Bearish structure, lower lows and lower highs here. So there isn't much that we have at the moment. Right, if you move down to the 4 hours, yeah, there isn't any setup at this point, right? If we're playing any kind of reversal, right, or price to acknowledge this higher time frame support, right, we need to see consolidation and a change in market structure here. So that's not what we're seeing. You can see right now it's still bearish, right? Prices are just breaking structure. So there isn't much setup on pound Aussie at the moment. Okay, so if price does, you can see that if there are any kind of consolidation at this point, right, price has to again start breaking or changing market structure. You can see at this point, right, even if I were to go to the higher time frame, just marking out the highs and lows, you can see still in a bearish structure, right? And at this point in a bearish structure, right, there isn't any potential entries. The one thing that we can look at here, right, at least if you're on the 1 hour time frame, the most recent supply region that we have, right, depending on how this candle closed, right, price closed beyond this, right, and we see a pullback into the zone, then the next resistance candle that we have really comes in here. You can see this region, right? So this area that price consolidated before it failed. So we see that consolidation here, tested 3 times, and then price retest this zone and fail. Right, so if price closes below this, right, you could see a short-term pullback into this zone. But where we are right now, right, you can see still bearish. 4 hours, 1 hour, right? This whole move, it's just forming lower lows and lower highs. Okay, so I hope that this helps. Right, now let's take a look at what else do we have here? I believe that's what we have. Right, I answered all of your questions. You're most welcome, Harris. Okay. Okay, I have a question about gold, right? On via the live stream, right? So for gold, let's take a look at that. So this is where what we highlighted on gold, right? I think you missed the earlier one. Essentially, on the higher time frame, prices are in a resistance region, and we're seeing a pullback and retest of the trend line, right? On the monthly, you can see the whole consolidation here, right? Price came in, tested the low, but failed to break to the downside. So it created this monthly high as a potential target. And if you take a look at it on the weekly, pretty much the same things, right? This whole leg prices are testing the demand zone. So right now on the weekly, it created this high on the weekly as the target. If you move down to the daily time frame, on the daily, we're seeing a test of this region, but this whole leg that caused that pullback is still in a bearish structure. Right? If you take a look at it on the daily, the 4 hours, right, prices are still in a bearish structure, lower lows and lower highs, right? We highlighted this as a potential resistance zone that price could come into, right? So you can see one thing to note with that is that with every entry, right, it has to create a target, which means that if price starts coming into this zone, right, if it comes into this region, pulls back into this zone on the 1 hour time frame, right? So this area on the 1 hour, you can see this whole leg is still bullish, right? Prices are in a bullish structure. You can see clear higher lows and higher highs. I put these levels in close 15 minutes as well. Just looking at the peaks and troughs, you can see it's still forming higher lows and higher highs. So any potential pullback into a demand area, right? This whole leg itself, it creates a target. So if it does, price starts pushing into this zone and it starts reversing, again, in the form of bullish structure, right? Change in market structure, we can target this high that caused that pullback. So this is the lower time frame view on gold, right? So I hope that answers your question, Amar, right? Yeah, so I believe that those are all the questions that we have, right? You're most welcome, Jamilo. Okay, so with that, right, those are all the questions that we have, right? So for those of you guys who want to attend the sessions, right, I'll just go through, or you want to get recording of this, right? You can actually go email support@vantagemarkets.com. So let me just bring out the email, right? For those of you guys who want a recording of this, just email support@vantagemarkets.com. For if you want to sign up for the previous session, right, via Zoom, I mean the next few sessions via Zoom, just go to vantagemarkets.com, education and tools, and you can see the schedule as well as the speakers, right? So we do have it on a daily basis, right? So you can check the speakers and schedules for the next week. Okay, so with that, we have come to the end of the session, right? Thanks everyone for staying with us till the end, right? Have a great weekend and we will catch you guys again next week.